Welcome, everybody. Welcome to installment number 4 of Challenging Everything I Believe as a Christian. That's right. This is where I chronicle a spiritual journey that I'm going through and challenging everything. I started off, of course, with challenging the very existence of God, which took up the first 3 episodes. And now I am going to go a little bit in a different direction. This is actually what kind of set me off on this, or one of the things that set me off on this quest in the first place, right? I'm going to now go with polytheism versus monotheism. In other words, is there a whole bunch of gods or is there one? Because, at least to me, in my journey through the first 3 episodes, I've come to the conclusion that yes, there is a God. Yes, he does exist. And again, this is my journey. I'm chronicling the things that I'm going through, the things that I'm studying, the research that I've done. If you come to a different conclusion based upon, research and not just opinion, then I'll power to you, right? But I'm hoping that you will benefit somehow from this journey that I'm going through. It's kind of like a video diary of my spiritual journey moving forward. All right, now, moving on. Okay, like I said, I believe, based on the evidence before me, there is an intelligence. There is a God. The question now is there one or is there multiple gods? Is there a hierarchy or a council with lesser spirits or gods, or is it, monotheism? Like I said, the belief in one God. What's the right answer? Well, I'm going to start off with this, because this, is the thought that really set this whole journey off. Many, if not most, of the early civilizations and empires believed in polytheism. They believed in, multiple gods. Greece, Rome, Egypt, India, meaning Hinduism, Sumeria, the Norse, or the Vikings, the Celts, Native Americans, and if you break that down into every tribe, you're talking hundreds, maybe thousands of separate groups just there. The Maya, the Aztecs, the Inca, the Druids, and African tribes. The same thing goes for them as with the Native Americans, is that if you break down into each separate tribe, you're talking thousands. So there are hundreds and thousands of ancient groups that were polytheistic. Now, this raised big questions to me. Why were so many of the earliest civilizations polytheistic? Why do they believe in multiple gods? And so, in my mind, this is bolstering the claim or the possibility of polytheism. Does it in any way prove polytheism? No. But it kind of helps sway that pendulum in that direction, right? And because think about it. More civilizations, especially early civilizations, believed in polytheism than any other theory. In other words, more believed in polytheism than monotheism, historically speaking. Not the number of people, because obviously the population of the world is bigger now, but more types of groups, more groups. So, why? There's got to be something to it, right? If everybody is believing it, maybe there's something to the polytheistic way of looking at things. So, anthropologists and archaeologists have a lot of similar theories. There's not a lot in the way of evidence or information showing why people were polytheistic back in the day. But so there are really just a lot of theories. But a lot of these theories revolve around a similar thought. Again, obviously not 100% of them, but a good portion, a good percentage of these theories are based around a similar thought. Okay, and that thought is this: that as man, early man, and again they're going off an evolutionary mindset. As early man, looked around, he did not yet understand that inanimate things or things that didn't have intelligence, were not alive. So they thought, the rivers and lakes were alive. They believed that mountains were alive. They believed that, trees, although yes, they are technically life, they believed that they had like an intelligence to them. That, weather patterns were a separate being. And so because of this, they started attributing personalities to them, and ultimately this led to them being a god, led to them believing in polytheism. And again, this is a theory more than it is anything else, but a lot of the theories revolve around that idea. All right, now, does this prove polytheism? No. But again, most early civilizations believed in polytheism, so the claim, has a little bit of, is bolstered a little bit by, that fact. Again, it does help the case of polytheism. And again, if you're going by an evolutionary mindset, which, I haven't bought into, but we haven't even gotten to that part yet. If you're going by that mindset, that, okay, that is a possibility, but there's no proof. It's just a theory and it's a thought. Okay. However, it is possible that every single one of these early ancient groups of people misunderstood God, and thus thought there was more than one. So that's why you can't say that, polytheism is true simply because everybody, believed in it. And a lot of scholars, say that monotheism came out of polytheism. So in other words, a lot of people will say polytheism came first, monotheism developed later on with Abraham and similar people around that time. But mostly they attribute everything to Abraham. So, so does that, again, mean polytheism is true? No. But what it does show is that you could make a case in that direction. More than one God. I mean, you have to look at the facts. You have to think it through. However, now this is a big however, because now at this point in my study and my research, I am, swaying toward, wow, maybe there's more than one God. Maybe it's possible. Not sold on it yet, but, it's leading in that direction. So let's take a look, because I really want to make sure that I get the truth. I really want to make sure that what I'm believing is true. So that's why I'm challenging everything I believe. Now, I started doing a little bit more research, and this is what I found. There's a place called History Stock Exchange, which says that polytheistic religions all have monotheistic overtones. In other words, there's no such thing as real polytheism. Or at least at the beginning there was no such thing as polytheism. Because you see, all polytheistic religions, at least at the beginning, and most of them even now, have a head creator god and lesser gods, sometimes called demigods. If you really, really look at what the implication of that is, versus, up against things like the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, and a lot of other religious scriptures, what you see is that is very similar to the idea of God and angels and demons and ministering spirits. Right? Native American mythology all have a great spirit. The Egyptians have Amun-Ra, the creator god, ruling over all the other gods. And the same thing can be said for the Greeks. And even Hinduism. Hinduism, which is probably the most prominent and the most well-known of polytheistic religions that still exists today, really is not polytheistic, because they have a head creator god that started it all off. All right now. So now the evidence is kind of going this way. So now I'm swaying back towards monotheism. Does this prove monotheism? No. Of course not. But, the evidence for polytheism is really fake news. You see, there is no real polytheistic religion nowadays. Yep, that's right. Hinduism, the most prominent, is not polytheistic. It's monotheistic. That's right. All right. So if most, if not all, polytheistic religions have a head or creator god who is greater and thus makes them really monotheistic, with angels and spirits underneath them, it really kind of put a big hole in the polytheistic claim. Now, this is why this is important. And let me explain to why the ancient civilization thing is important. Because to be honest with you, there's not a lot of evidence either way scientifically. There's philosophy and logic, and there's history. And the reason why this historical part is important is because the further back you go in history, the closer these people were to the actual events that are being described. So in other words, people who were alive and saw and witnessed Super Bowl I, can more accurately describe and account and give an account for the events that unfolded during Super Bowl I. People that were alive at the time of World War I, World War II, 9/11, right? Think about 9/11. There are people that I work with now, so young that they don't remember 9/11. If they were alive, they were like 3 or 4. Some of them weren't even alive. My kid is 5 years old. 9/11 happened well before she was even thought of. Who's going to have a more accurate understanding of it, me or her? The people that watch Super Bowl I or the people that watch it on TV? So this is why the history thing is important. This is why the ancient civilization thing is important. Because these people were closer to the time of the actual creation. And the further we go from any event, the more the facts get diluted and distorted. So, this is why this is important. All right. Okay, so Stephen Langdon of Oxford wrote in the 1930s. And there's a couple of quotes again here from the 1930s. I understand it's a long time ago, but these were pretty well-known guys back then. And this guy says that monotheism preceded polytheism. There's a Dutch archaeologist, pretty famous. I'm going to try to pronounce his name. If I jack it up, I'm sorry. I think his name was, Henri Frankfurt. In 1936, he suggested that Babylon, an ancient civilization known for having multiple gods, actually had one. Started off with one. But his different attributes were celebrated at different times. So it would be the equivalent of celebrating the love of God, or the justice of God, or the mercy of God, or the creation of God, the creative power of God. And what happened is, over time, the people forgot that these were simply attributes of the same God and started attributing a deity to each individual aspect of God. So in other words, that would be saying, for years and years and years we celebrate the love of God, and at some point we forget that love is an attribute of God and start saying, this is the God of love. This is the God of justice. This is the God of mercy, and this is the God of peace, making them all separate gods, when in fact they're really just attributes of the same God. It would be like taking the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long-suffering, and making each one of those a God, because they were celebrated individually at different times during the year. And he suggests that there is evidence to prove this. If there is evidence to prove this, then again it bolsters the claim that monotheism is the first, and that polytheism came out of monotheism, not the reverse, which is what people think. AllAboutReligion.org says that monotheism did not begin until Abraham. However, I have read a lot in this research, and I've done a lot of studying. And like I said, even Hinduism, by a lot of scholars, is considered, really monotheistic, or originated with monotheism. There are a lot of people who believe in polytheism came first. However, again, if you carefully analyze it and research it, it looks to be the complete opposite. Does this prove that it's only one God? No, of course not. But it makes a very, very, very strong case in the opposite direction. You see, the idea that polytheism came first seems to be fake news. It seems to be a fallacy, put out by people who don't want to believe God in the first place, or who do not want to, who don't want to hurt other people's feelings by saying that their God or their beliefs are wrong. Because in reality, most religions started off as monotheistic. So if most religions start off as monotheistic, then these civilizations were much, much closer to the actual events in question as far as creation. So the story is less and less diluted. So it's very possible, based upon this, to say that there is one God, there is one way, and those facts of how he is, or what he requires, or what he wanted, got diluted over time. And then later on, it got further diluted into, there being said that there is more than one God. So in other words, this is God, this is what he expects. A few years down the line, things get diluted. Okay, God likes this, no, God likes that, no, God likes this, no, God likes this. A few years later, no, there's more than one God. Because obviously, your truth is truth and my truth is truth, and we have different ways of looking at what God wants, so therefore there must not be one God, there must be different gods who require different things. But, again, does all of this prove that there's one God? No, but it makes a stronger case. All right, now, where are we? Okay, so I've done a lot of research here. Okay, and I'm looking. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. there is a lot less information, about this subject, and the subject of proving polytheism or proving, monotheism, than anything else. Really, this is like so little. I have found zero actual apologists for polytheism. Like, when I mean a polytheist, I mean somebody who's actually got proof, and spends a whole lot of time with scientific, historic proof in defense of polytheism. There are people and scholars throughout history who have some theories and they base it upon a little bit of history, but no person whose actual ministry or whose actual goal is to prove polytheism. You have, Christian apologists whose job is to, look at proving the Bible from a historical and a scientific standpoint, especially creation. They have some of those for Islam and Judaism and other beliefs. But polytheism does not have anybody that I can see. And I've done hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of research. I'm sure there's somebody out there, but they haven't put anything online, and there's no trace of them anywhere. Why? That begs the question, why? I'm saying, again, this is a personal journey. It's a personal thing that I'm going through, that I'm chronicling for you guys, but I'm telling you, that raises a lot of red flags to me. If there's not anybody willing, to find a defense from a historical and scientific standpoint, then guess what? Can't be a whole lot of proof. There are a lot of polytheists out there. There's a lot of them. And I'm not just talking about Hindus. There's a lot of New Age people and people who just believe in polytheism in general. But there's nobody out there, with any kind of credibility, publishing anything saying this is evidence, polytheism. This is why polytheism is true, and these are the facts and the science behind it. So if more than one God exists, okay, now we're going to get to a little bit of philosophy here, okay? If more than one God exists, they would have to be completely equal in authority and must never argue or contradict each other. Okay, think about that. Because if they're not equal in authority, then guess what? It goes back to the ancient religions who appear polytheistic but aren't, right? A head god and lesser gods. So therefore, in order for them all to be actual gods and to be more than one god, they have to all be the same authority. They have to all be perfect. They have to all be all-knowing and all-powerful. And they can't contradict each other. Because creation is so fragile that one part of creation, when I mean creation, anything in the universe, every process, every atom, every molecule, if one tiny piece of creation is messed up or changed or jacked up because these gods had an argument or a disagreement or contradicted each other, then guess what? All of creation could be doomed. It could cease to exist. It would be similar to parents who disagree on a particular subject or on everything. They have different views, and they espouse those different views and express them, separately to the kids. So let's say I say, it's okay to it's okay to stay out till 10 o'clock. Mom says, no, you have to be in by 7. Okay? It's going to cause chaos, and it's going to cause turmoil. It's going to cause problems for the child and ultimately the household. Especially if, it's like, I don't want to say militant, but it's like, I'm saying, no, this is the way it's going to be. And Mom says, no, this is the way it's going to be. And neither one of us backed out. It's going to cause a problem. Does that prove that there's one God? No. But what it does prove, as that it's not very likely. And it also shows that there's no need for more than one God. Again, does this prove it? No. All right, so I went to a website called debate.org, and what it says is, one guy says, there's a commentator going back and forth with others, and this one commentator says it is not logical for there to be more than one God. What he says is that because by definition God is all-powerful and all-knowing and everywhere present, there is no need for another God, and actually no room for another God. Because one God is enough to do everything. But again, there's not even room for another God. There's only room for one because he's everywhere present. And he does everything. His debaters, said that polytheism is possible because there are many different gods worshipped. So that makes polytheism possible. Let me tell you something. There's a lot of different ways to do things. You can cheat, you can murder, you can do it the correct way, all to accomplish a goal. Yeah, it doesn't prove that every single way is right. Yeah, if everybody believes that the sky is a different color, some say it's purple, some say it's green, some say it's yellow, some say it's blue, doesn't mean that the sky is multiple colors. What it means is that somebody's got it right and everybody else has got it wrong. So technically, in a sense, yes, it is possible. Anything's possible. But just because everything's possible doesn't mean it's true. So that being said, you gotta lean, or I'm gonna lean anyway, towards the monotheistic side, because God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere present. And to have two or more all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present beings doesn't really make sense. Again, does this prove? No. But now we're making a strong case for monotheism. Now, before I close out this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience. I'm not going to get into detail. I'm just going to mention it real fast, that I've had a lot of experience before I became a Christian with trying other things. And that's kind of what this is about. Right? I'm going to go back and revisit what I think. But before I came to the point at, where I became a Christian, my experience with trying all these other things tells me that any of these other so-called gods, or multiple spirits, or entities, or ghosts, or whatever you want to call them, are more manipulative and dangerous than anything else. And it caused me and other people that I know more harm than good. I'm going to leave it at that. There's a lot of details I can go into, but if you got any questions about some of that stuff, feel free to ask. On a comment or a private message or whatever. Again, this does not prove monotheism, but this is a personal journey, and in my mind, based upon the information that I've researched and looked at, because there isn't a ton on this subject, but I spent hours and hours and hours and hours trying to find it, and my personal experience, I'm going to end this episode and this part of my journey with believing that there is only one God. Again, you got questions, comment or private message me. Or if you know my phone number, something, call.